Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're tackling something absolutely huge today, a topic that honestly touches pretty much all of us, the scarcity trap and the architecture of debt. If you've ever looked around and just thought, why? Why does society feel so relentlessly pressured to rack up debt just to buy more stuff? Well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to unpack some really compelling source material today that digs into the very foundation of our modern financial behaviors. It's a profound look at the psychological mechanics of debt, so let's break the whole shebang down step by step. Section 1. The modern debt illusion, a societal construct. The source material challenges a massive assumption we kind of just accept as fact, that wanting a debt-fueled life is just human nature. But actually, it argues that this is an illusion. It's a carefully built set of societal norms we've just absorbed over time. The text literally says, I think we have been programmed from long time, like from aftermath of world wars, that we were supposed to take loans to lead a happy and rich life. I mean, that's a seriously provocative argument, right? The assertion here is that our very definition of a happy and rich life was actively rewritten after the world wars. It essentially equated personal fulfillment with, well, taking on financial liabilities. It frames our modern consumer habits not as these free, independent choices, but as the result of long-term societal conditioning. Which naturally leads us to ask, why? Why do we take out loans to possess goods and services we may not actually need? I want you to genuinely think about that for a second as we go through this explainer. We've all been there, right? Feeling that sudden overwhelming itch to upgrade to the newest phone just because a later model dropped. Or financing a flashy car just for the status update. The text points out that we just operate under this assumption that going into debt for these things is practically mandatory if we want to be respected and valued. But hit the brakes for a second. Look at the phrase, may actually not need. Why is our craving for societal respect so powerful that it completely steamrolls our rational judgment about what we actually need to survive and thrive? And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict. On one side, you have the societal expectation, this total illusion that taking out loans is your golden ticket to being respected, valued, and happy. But then on the flip side, you have the reality. And the reality is just possessing goods and services you might not even need. The text explicitly contrasts this emotional mirage of buying respect with the stark, kind of harsh, practical reality of just hoarding unnecessary stuff. We're essentially trading our actual real-world financial stability for an expected emotional payoff that honestly might be entirely made up. Moving on to Section 2, the invisible marketing force, systemic architects. So if this whole thing is an illusion, who exactly is building it? Well, according to the source material, the systemic architects pulling the strings are the banking system, the finance system, and the real estate industry. And the text uses a very deliberate phrase here. It claims these massive industries are actually in cahoots. The argument presented is that these three sectors don't just happen to overlap, they actively work together to aggressively allure people. They coordinate to push a narrative that makes the average person believe they are missing something fundamental. They are actively manufacturing a sense of inadequacy that, surprise, surprise, can only be fixed through their specific financial products. Now, what's really interesting about this is exactly how these industries allegedly operate. The source identifies it as the scarcity mindset. It defines this as a psychological vulnerability that is exploited by industries to make people feel they are lacking essential elements for a happy life. It's not just about selling a product. It's about exploiting a deeply rooted, almost primal fear of not having enough. These industries create a feeling of scarcity and then, very conveniently, offer a loan or a mortgage as the one and only life raft to save you from that engineered panic. The power of this industrial marketing is described as this invisible force that is just overwhelmingly compelling. In fact, the text claims this force is so incredibly strong that we literally submit to our primitive instincts. And that's a fascinating way to look at consumer behavior. It's not saying we're just making silly math errors on a spreadsheet. No, it's arguing that this marketing bypasses our logic entirely. It bypasses the rational brain and taps straight into our most base, primitive urges for security, status, and survival. It just completely short-circuits our rational thinking. Which brings us to Section 3, trapped by primitive instincts, the cost of debt. When our primitive urges are successfully manipulated by this invisible marketing force, what's the actual real-world fallout? Like, what does this systemic financial allure ultimately cost you and me? 20. So the crucial point is the massive, undeniable weight of time involved here. The text explicitly claims that because we submit to these primitive instincts, we jump into debt for 20 years or more, typically just for a piece of land or a house. 2 decades. Let that sink in. That is a massive chunk of a human life, fully committed to a financial institution. And it's all driven by a mindset of scarcity and a societal programming that whispers to us that this is the only legitimate way to achieve value and respect. This really brings the entire core argument together. We start with the primitive instinct, our natural human vulnerabilities being completely overwhelmed, making us submit to a compelling, invisible marketing force. And that directly leads to the trap, surrendering 20+ years of our lives to debt for a piece of land or a house. The case the source makes here is that our perfectly natural instincts are essentially being weaponized against our own financial freedom. Our deep human desire to belong and feel secure is captured by industries that monetize that exact desire into decades of highly profitable debt. And that leaves us with this final, absolutely vital question to chew on. If we trade decades of our lives to satisfy a manufactured sense of scarcity, who really benefits from our quest for a happy and rich life? Are we actually serving our own happiness, or are we just fueling the architecture of the banking and real estate systems? It's a profound lens through which to view our own financial decisions, isn't it? I hope this explainer helped you visualize and structure the key arguments from the source text. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack all this, and I really encourage you to keep questioning those invisible forces in your own economic life. Catch you next time.